From the outside, Alexander Donovan had the perfect life, a global real estate empire, a sprawling estate overlooking the Pacific, and a beautiful wife he proudly displayed at countless charity galas. But behind the gilded doors of his modern Beverly Hills mansion lay a dark secret capable of destroying everything he'd built. Without warning, Alexander made a choice so brazen, so cruel, it would unravel his carefully constructed world. He let his mistress choose his unborn child's name. His wife, Sarah, pregnant and blissfully unaware, had no idea she'd already been replaced, nor could she imagine the betrayal that would soon blow her life apart. Alexander Donovan was the epitome of success. Born in Los Angeles to modest beginnings, he rose from near poverty to head Donovan Real Estate and Holdings, a firm controlling properties all over Southern California. He had a steel-trap mind, a knack for turning risks into fortune, and an uncanny ability to charm investors and socialites alike. His jawline was strong and chiseled, and dark, neatly slicked-back hair gave him an air of understated power. At 38, he was old enough to boast a well-earned empire, but young enough to be the object of desire for women who moved in high society circles. Alexander met his wife Sarah Mitchell, now Sarah Donovan, 10 years prior. She was a bright-eyed UCLA graduate, a marketing prodigy who'd caught his eye at a fundraising gala. Something about her sincerity had broken through his typically calculating nature. He proposed a year later, giving her a diamond ring that sparkled almost as brightly as her wide, trusting smile. Their wedding was the talk of the town, lavish, star-studded, and rumor had it that even celebrities like George Clooney made discreet appearances. For years they were the golden couple, philanthropic, glamorous, and seemingly inseparable. Yet the weight of wealth and public expectations took its toll. The glossy photos in magazines hinted at a perfect marriage, but behind those forced smiles were whispers of arguments and discontent. Sarah wanted to start a family almost immediately, but Alexander felt the timing wasn't right. He was expanding his business internationally and insisted that any distractions could derail his momentum. For the first 5 years of their marriage, Sarah yielded to his wishes. All that changed after Sarah turned 34. Time felt as though it was slipping through her fingers, and she pushed Alexander to commit to children. Reluctantly, he agreed, less from paternal longing and more from the sense that this was the next box to check in his formula for success. Soon enough, Sarah was pregnant, and their acquaintances at the country club showered them with congratulations. The tabloids rejoiced Donovan heir on the way. But beneath the polished veneer, Alexander grew restless. He'd been caught in a cycle of constant achievement since he was a teenager. Each time he conquered a new business challenge, he craved the next one. The frantic pace of success left him little time to genuinely cultivate emotional connections, especially with Sarah. As her pregnancy advanced, she became more focused on prenatal classes, medical appointments, and reconfiguring their home to prepare for the baby's arrival. Their once passionate nights turned into exhausted evenings by the fireplace, with Sarah reading baby books and Alexander scanning emails on his phone mind in a boardroom half the world away. That was the environment in which the seeds of betrayal were sown. A casual introduction through a mutual friend led Alexander to Natalia Rivers. At 25, Natalia was fiery, ambitious, and enthralled by his aura of power. She was a marketing consultant, fresh out of USC, and he quickly roped her into small projects for Donovan Real Estate. Their dynamic crackled with tension. She was the complete opposite of Sarah, a daring risk-taker, unafraid to speak her mind, unburdened by pregnancy. In Natalia, Alexander saw a free spirit, unchained from the responsibilities that now dominated his wife's life. Their professional collaborations soon bled into after-work cocktails, clandestine dinners, and inevitably passion-laced trysts in five-star penthouse suites. Sarah had suspicions as her husband became even more distant, yet she never pressed him too hard. She chalked it up to business expansion stress and the typical nerves of impending fatherhood. In her heart, she believed in Alexander's fidelity after all he'd waited so long before agreeing to have children. She assumed he understood the gravity of this commitment. Little did she know that at that very moment, Alexander was whispering sweet promises into Natalia's ear, vowing that one day she would be more than just a secret lover. By the time Sarah was 5 months pregnant, the cracks in her marriage grew more conspicuous. Late-night meetings had always been part of Alexander's life. She was used to them. But now, he seemed to make excuses to be out of the house most evenings. She'd find new cologne scents lingering on his shirts, or an unfamiliar note scrawled in a careless feminine handwriting in the notepad he kept at home. Sarah's heart wanted to dismiss these as coincidences, and she was terrified to confront him. She was pregnant with his child. The stakes were too high. The fear of the unknown paralyzed her. Meanwhile, Natalia reveled in her newfound status. She was no longer a timid consultant hoping to catch a break. Every weekend saw her dressed to kill at exclusive restaurants Nobu in Malibu Craigs, on Melrose, or Chateau Marmont on Sunset Boulevard. Alexander was frequently at her side under the guise of business dinners. On some nights, they'd end up at the Mayborn Beverly Hills Hotel, where Alexander had rented a luxurious suite. Under the dim lighting of that private oasis, they'd indulge in champagne, caviar, and each other. Alexander began taking Natalia on short weekend getaways, telling Sarah he was meeting with potential foreign investors. They flew in his private jet to Napa Valley for wine tastings or zipped down to Cabo San Lucas to lounge at exclusive resorts. Natalia was dazzled by the red carpet treatment, the personal concierge service, and the ring of security staff hovering discreetly around them. It was during one such trip that he made an offhand remark that would set in motion the shocking betrayal. "Imagine if this child I'm about to have, if I could just name it after someone I care about, or give it a name that truly symbolizes the life I want." Natalia, draped over a chaise lounge with a glass of sparkling rosé in hand, raised her eyebrow playfully. "Someone you care about? Who could that be?" Alexander locked eyes with her, his expression unreadable. "You know who," he answered quietly. "Maybe a name that draws from your life, from something that ties us together." Despite her bold, carefree persona, Natalia felt a surge of surprise and pride. Alexander was contemplating bestowing upon his child a name that she, the mistress, would choose. It thrilled her to imagine wielding that kind of power over the Donovan's pristine legacy. But it also raised a question: was Alexander truly serious about her? Could he really be so reckless as to let his mistress name the baby he was having with his wife? As they watched the sunset over the California coast, sipping the last of their wine, Natalia found herself lost in a blend of excitement and apprehension. She wanted to secure her place in Alexander's life. Naming his child would be a scandalous, triumphant step. But how would Sarah react? Or more accurately, what if Sarah never even knew who chose the name? At 6 months pregnant, Sarah could no longer ignore the tension engulfing their marriage. She had trouble sleeping. Night after night, she roamed the corridors of their Beverly Hills mansion, unable to settle her mind. Sometimes she'd pause in the immaculate nursery they'd set up. The walls were painted in a soft pastel yellow, The crib, an elegant, custom-made piece imported from Italy. She would try to imagine the laughter of a baby, the warmth of a family united. But instead, she felt alone. The house was too quiet, too large, too cold. It didn't help that she'd begun receiving curious messages on social media. Anonymous users, or perhaps well-meaning acquaintances, would drop cryptic hints about seeing Alexander out at odd hours, accompanied by a striking brunette. One message read, "I saw your husband at the Polo Lounge last night. He didn't look lonely." Another said, "Hey, Sarah, hope all is well. Saw Alexander in Malibu with a younger woman. Might be a colleague." Though these notes were vague, they reinforced her fear. She confided in her old friend from college, Rebecca Chang, a lawyer at a high-profile firm in Century City. Over an afternoon tea in Sarah's sprawling backyard, she told Rebecca about her growing distrust and recounted the suspicious signs she couldn't rationalize away. Rebecca, typically measured in her speech, stiffened. "Sarah, you need to gather facts. I don't want to see you blindsided." She offered to discreetly reach out to a private investigator she knew. But Sarah hesitated. She still clung to the hope that her husband was faithful, that all of these were misunderstandings or malicious rumors spread by envious outsiders. The baby's arrival was looming closer. She was overwhelmed by decisions, picking out strollers, finalizing the nursery, scheduling doctor's appointments, selecting a birth plan. Sarah found it exhausting to manage these tasks alone, especially since Alexander was almost always absent, claiming urgent business demands. When she asked for his input on baby names, he responded ambiguously, "Let's keep it simple. I don't want anything too complicated. I'll handle it, trust me." A weird chill ran down her spine. She wanted him to at least brainstorm with her to share in the thus magic of naming their child. But Alexander seemed distant, as though he'd already made up his mind. In truth, Alexander had made up his mind, just not in the way Sarah had hoped. Natalia was quick to seize this opportunity. She spent long nights scouring baby name books, cross-referencing them with cultural references. She liked searching for one that would stand out. She wanted something memorable, unusual, yet powerful. A name that would be her silent signature, etched into the Donovan legacy forever. She compiled a short list of 6 names, each with a backstory. She mulled over them, as if selecting a diamond ring for herself. One evening, as Alexander lay beside her in the plush bedroom of a secret Bel Air penthouse he rented for their rendezvous, Natalia presented her top choices. He held the notepad in his hands, scanning names like Orion, Evander, Lucian. They sounded exotic, a dramatic departure from the typical conservative monikers passed down through wealthy families for generations. But Alexander liked the sense of rebellion, of stamping a new generation with an identity that was entirely under his control. Evander Donovan. Alexander mused aloud. Has a ring to it. It's strong, means something like good man in Greek. He smiled wryly at her. Let's finalize that, shall we? Natalia's eyes glowed, and she scooted closer, draping her arm across his chest. Evander Donovan, it is then, she whispered. She couldn't believe the thrill of it. The wife was sitting at home pregnant while she, the mistress, was naming the baby. She thrived on the adrenaline rush it gave her, but also on a certain darkness. This was as close to vengeance against the perfect Sarah as she could get. It was Natalia's silent assertion that she was more important to Alexander, more valued, more loved. In the back of Alexander's mind, a pang of guilt flickered. He remembered the look on Sarah's face whenever she spoke about baby names, how she radiated excitement, how she tried to engage him. Was it fair He wondered momentarily to rob her of this milestone. But that twinge quickly subsided, drowned by his desire to please Natalia and maintain the exhilarating double life he'd created. Sarah's baby shower arrived, hosted at the Donovan estate. Dozens of women from the upper echelons of Beverly Hills society arrived in pastel dresses, bearing expensive gifts and elaborate floral arrangements. Sarah, wearing an elegant cream maternity gown, moved through the throng of acquaintances with practiced poise. Every so often a wave of sadness coursed through her. This was supposed to be one of the happiest days of her life, but she felt strangely numb. Alexander had promised to drop in to greet the guests, but as the clock ticked past noon, he was nowhere in sight. Halfway through unwrapping a tower of presents, the front door opened. In walked Alexander, impeccably dressed in a tailored charcoal suit, followed by a tall, imposing man whose name Sarah didn't recognize. Business associate, he quickly explained, to no one in particular. She was used to these last-minute additions. She forced a smile, welcoming him into the joyous atmosphere. But even among the swirl of ribbons and confetti, she sensed his aloofness. He briefly congratulated her, pressed a formal kiss to her cheek, and then mingled with the guests in a mechanical way. An hour later, as the baby shower wound down, Sarah cornered him in the library. Towers of baby gifts threatened to topple around them. "Alex, can't you stay a little longer just for the final photos?" she pleaded. He hesitated, checking the time on his Cartier watch. "I have a meeting at the Peninsula Hotel in an hour. I'll stay for a few pictures, but then I really have to go." Sarah attempted to quell the frustration rising in her throat. "This is our baby shower, Alex, our child's celebration. You can't keep leaving me alone." Her voice quivered. He sighed, a mixture of annoyance and pity in his eyes. "I know this is important, but so is my work, Sarah. Everything I do is for our family." His words rang hollow. She watched him pose for a handful of snapshots, forcing a brilliant smile for their guests. Then he abruptly excused himself, leaving Sarah to host alone once again. As she walked him to the front door, her friend Rebecca stepped into the foyer, greeting them briefly. Alexander gave them both a cursory nod and headed out. Rebecca took in the despair etched on Sarah's face and looped her arm around Sarah's waist comfortingly. "He left again, didn't he?" Sarah nodded, tears brimming. "I don't know if I can hold us together anymore." A few days later, Sarah mustered the courage to call Rebecca. Her friend listened in calm silence as Sarah confessed her relentless anxieties. "I can't ignore the signs," Sarah said, her voice trembling. "I'm ready to know the truth, even if it shatters me." Rebecca arranged a discreet meeting with a licensed private investigator named Michael Green. She had worked with him on a high-stakes divorce case where the client suspected hidden assets. He was detail-oriented, professional, and protective of client privacy. Sarah, feeling a swirl of shame and relief, sat across from him in Rebecca's law office, explaining her fears. Green nodded slowly as she recounted the suspicious texts, the unexplained absences, the intangible distance between them. "I'll need access to his phone records, credit card statements, and any personal schedule you can provide," Green said, maintaining a gentle tone that told Sarah he'd handled delicate matters before. Sarah swallowed and answered, "I can get them, but it might take a bit of creativity. He keeps most of those locked away." "Take your time. I'll start with my own sources," Green replied, "and I'll be discreet." Leaving that meeting, Sarah felt a mixture of guilt and determination. For so long, she believed trust was the foundation of a healthy marriage. But the alternative, living in constant doubt while pregnant with their baby, was unbearable. She chose to search for the truth, no matter how painful. At 7.5 months pregnant, Sarah had a doctor's appointment at Cedars-Sinai. She texted Alexander, asking if he could join her for the ultrasound and the final checkups. He responded quickly, "I'll be there at 10 a.m. Promise." For once, he arrived on time, though he looked slightly flustered, as if he'd raced across town. Sarah's OB-GYN, Dr. Lisa Hernandez, was a reassuring presence in the exam room, praising the healthy development of the baby. After the checkup, Dr. Hernandez asked the question so many expectant parents relish. "So, have you two decided on a name yet?" Sarah opened her mouth, ready to say that they were still deciding. But Alexander responded first, "Evander." Sarah's gaze snapped to him. "Evander," she echoed, startled. They had never discussed this name, not once. Just last week, Sarah had floated a few suggestions, Daniel Nathan, or something more traditional. He'd shot them down, saying he wasn't sure yet. Now here he was announcing Evander as though it were a done deal. Dr. Hernandez smiled politely. "That's a strong name. Greek origins, right? It means good man or strong man." Alexander nodded, turning to Sarah. I came across it recently and liked it. Thought it might be something different." "What do you think?" Sarah was at a loss. Something about the name felt so random, yet the conviction in Alexander's voice suggested he'd thought about this for a while. Torn between her confusion and a desire not to make a scene, she forced a weak smile. "Evander? Yes, it's unique." The drive back home was silent. Alexander focused on the road, barely acknowledging her presence. Sarah stared at him, dissecting his profile as though he were a puzzle she needed to solve. He had always been decisive, but this felt different. This name was chosen behind her back. When they finally pulled up to their mansion, she couldn't hold back any longer. "Why that name, Alex? You've never mentioned Evander before." He parked the car, taking a moment to answer. "It's not a big deal, Sarah. I wanted something strong and memorable. I figured you'd like it." Sarah's heart pounded. She mustered a courage she'd rarely shown him. "It is a big deal. This is our baby, and we're supposed to decide on his name together." Alexander exhaled sharply. "All right, calm down. We can still talk it through. Nothing is set in stone." He paused, glancing away. "I'm heading out. I have a meeting with a new business partner. We'll continue this conversation later." Watching him drive off, Sarah seethed with anger and confusion. The tension weighed on her mind. Something told her this was more than a simple name preference. She dialed Rebecca on impulse voice, shaking with tears as she recounted the bizarre exchange. Rebecca listened patiently. "I understand how you feel, Sarah. Names are important. But remember, Green is working on your case. We'll have answers soon. Hang in there." 2 weeks later, Michael Green summoned Sarah to his modest office in West Hollywood. Rebecca accompanied her for moral support. Sarah's hands grew clammy with nerves. She was well into her 8th month of pregnancy and stress levels were sky high. Green offered them seats and began calmly, "I have done a thorough investigation of Mr. Donovan's movements and financial transactions. He's taken multiple trips recently, Napa Valley, Cabo San Lucas, under the guise of business travel, always accompanied by the same woman, Natalia Rivers. She's listed as a marketing consultant at Donovan Real Estate. They've been spending nights at various hotels, the Mayborn, the Peninsula, private suites. Their relationship goes beyond business." Though Sarah expected such news, she still felt as if a dagger had been plunged into her chest. Sensing her pain, Green continued gently. "There's more. He's made several lavish purchases for her designer clothes, from Chanel jewelry, from Harry Winston. Interestingly, I discovered a property in Bel Air, under an LLC that Alexander controls, which Miss Rivers appears to be occupying." Sarah blinked, stunned. Her voice came out strained. So he's living with her part-time? Green nodded. It appears so. Rebecca interjected, her tone sharp with anger. He's basically leading a double life, and you're carrying his child, Sarah. This is reprehensible. Sarah felt numb tears slipping down her cheeks. She had suspected an affair, but not this level of betrayal and financial investment in another woman. She had to stifle a sob as she recalled the name Evander, so proudly introduced by Alexander. Natalia. Could it be that Natalia Rivers was the real reason behind that name choice? She mustered the question. Did you find anything about the baby's name, or any clue that he discussed it with her? Green exchanged a measured glance with Rebecca. I did come across a series of text messages referencing baby names. Most of them originated from Natalia's phone number to Mr. Donovan's personal line. It appears she's been researching names for your baby. Evander was at the top of her list. Sarah's body trembled at the confirmation. The scale of deception, letting his mistress name the baby, felt too surreal. For a moment, she feared she might faint. Rebecca placed a comforting hand on her shoulder, her voice tight with anger. He's crossed a line, Sarah. A big one. That night, Sarah waited in their marble-floored foyer for Alexander to return. She had no appetite for dinner, no desire to retire early. Instead, she sat on a cushioned bench beneath a grand portrait of them taken on their honeymoon in Bora Bora, the image mocking the woman she'd been. She was older now, heavily pregnant, drained of illusions. When the clock passed midnight, Alexander still wasn't home. Sarah fought back tears and marched to their bedroom, deciding she'd confront him in the morning. She could no longer live in denial. He slipped into the bedroom around 2 a.m., footsteps cautious, as though expecting she'd be asleep. Flipping on the bedside lamp, Sarah glared at him, tear tracks staining her cheeks. Alexander froze. She spoke, voice shaking with rage. Natalia Rivers, you bought her a penthouse. You spend your nights with her while I'm at home carrying your child. He tried to respond, but his words tripped over themselves. I can explain. Explain what? That you let your mistress name our baby. Her voice cracked, the anguish apparent. You've humiliated me. You've turned what should be the most beautiful time of my life into a horror show. Alexander's features hardened. You had me followed, he asked, outrage creeping into his voice. Yes, Sarah hissed, because you were never around. Because I was terrified to confront the truth but needed to know. And now I do. You lied to me in every way. He tried to place a placating hand on her shoulder, but she recoiled. I'm sorry you found out this way, he began, but it's complicated. My relationship with Natalia is not Sarah. Cut him off, tears flowing freely. It's not what Alex. It's not serious. Then why let her choose our son's name? Why buy her a home? Why share the intimacy that belongs to us, to our family? For a moment, guilt clouded his eyes, but he quickly returned to his practical, business-like stance. Sarah, I'm not going to deny my mistakes, but I do care about our child. I want to provide for you both. I wasn't in love with you anymore. This baby came at a time when our marriage was distant. I was looking for something else. She let out a hollow laugh, voice filled with despair. Something else. While your wife carried your child, you were seeking something else from a younger woman. Do you realize how cruel this is? You left me alone. You let her pick the name. You cheated me out of a precious bond with my son from the start. Alexander sighed, raking a hand through his hair. I'm sorry, but at this point, there's no going back. His bluntness stunned her. She couldn't hide her sorrow. We had everything. We could have worked on our marriage. You never gave it a chance. He reached out to touch her, but she took a step back. Her voice trembled with a finality that both startled and shamed him. I want you out of this house, Alex. We'll discuss lawyers and the future later. For now, leave. For a moment, he hesitated, but seeing the fire in her eyes, he gathered a few things and walked out, leaving Sarah hunched over in heartbreak, her pregnant belly a stark reminder of the child whose father had just deserted them both. Over the following days, Sarah wrestled with heartbreak, anger, and an overwhelming sense of betrayal. Her mother, Linda Mitchell, flew in from Chicago to stay by her side, offering maternal comfort. During the day, Sarah tried to keep busy preparing the nursery, finalizing postpartum care meeting with Rebecca to discuss legal ramifications. At night, her mind raced with confusion, sorrow, and occasionally shockingly hope that some miracle would restore her family. Alexander moved in with Natalia, dividing his time between the Bel Air penthouse and the corporate offices in Century City. Their affair was no longer hidden from the inner circles of Beverly Hills. Rumors circulated among the wealthy elite, fueled by paparazzi sightings of him and Natalia at exclusive events. The tabloids lapped up the story. Donovan's mistress takes center stage pregnant wife in seclusion. Sarah felt a mixture of humiliation and pity for herself every time she glanced at these headlines. She declined invitations to lunches and charity events, not wanting to face the gawking eyes. Her heartbreak was magnified by the child growing inside her, a painful reminder of the life she had envisioned, now overshadowed by Alexander's decisions. Then came an announcement that nearly broke her spirit. One morning, a glossy magazine landed on her doorstep, featuring a multi-page spread, Alexander Donovan's new flame, the sexy, ambitious Natalia Rivers. Page after page showcased lavish shots of Natalia wearing designer clothing, presumably paid for by Alexander. In the interview, Natalia played coy about their private life, but the insinuation was clear: she was now the woman in Alexander's life, and Sarah was the discarded wife, overshadowed by the mistress's calculated glamour. Though Sarah's heartbreak was immeasurable, it steeled her resolve. She contacted her friend Rebecca and asked to set the divorce process in motion. It was a big step, monumental even, but she couldn't remain legally bound to a man who had betrayed her so publicly and so profoundly. At the same time, she refused to let him waltz off with a new partner without facing consequences, especially financial ones, given the child's impending arrival. Sarah's water broke unexpectedly on a Sunday evening, 2 weeks before her due date. She was alone in her bedroom, breathing through mild contractions and trying to dial her mother's phone when the pain intensified. Fear seized her. Alexander wasn't here. That realization brought a fresh wave of sorrow. Gathering her strength, she called 911. An ambulance arrived, whisking her to Cedars-Sinai. She managed to call her mother, who rushed to the hospital. In the delivery room, Sarah battled a flurry of emotions. Her mother held her hand, trying to keep her calm, tears in her own eyes. She whispered, "It's going to be okay, honey. Focus on your baby boy." Nurses and doctors swarmed around, her words of encouragement echoing over the hum of monitors. Sarah's labor was long and difficult. She cried out for Alexander at one point, confusion fueling her desperation. But he never arrived. Rebecca came to support her, stepping in to soothe her as contractions escalated. Finally, near dawn, Sarah's son entered the world with a sharp cry. The nurse placed the tiny infant in her arms, and her tears mixed with relief and immeasurable love. He was here, her son, innocent and precious. After the delivery, Sarah lay in bed, physically and emotionally spent. She gazed down at the newborn, wrapped snugly in a striped hospital blanket. She brushed a hand across his fine, wispy hair. "Thank you for coming, my sweet boy," she whispered. In that moment she understood that while her marriage was irreparably broken, her life wasn't. She had someone to fight for, a reason to keep going. A day later, Alexander arrived at the hospital. Sarah was propped up in bed, flipping through an avalanche of get-well-soon cards from well-wishers. She glanced up, startled as he walked in a tense, nervous expression on his face. "I came as soon as I heard," he said. Sarah felt her anger surge. "You didn't hear when I went into labor. I called out for you, and you never came." Alexander looked away, ashamed. "I was in a meeting. My phone was off. By the time I checked my messages, I was on the other side of the city." She let out a bitter laugh. "A meeting with Natalia, I presume?" He stood there, quiet eyes flickering to the tiny bundle in Sarah's arms. The newborn stirred, letting out a soft, mewling cry. Alexander's features softened at the sight of his son. "He's beautiful," he murmured. Sarah's voice carried a tired bitterness. "He is. But you don't get to claim credit for that. I brought him into this world without you." He sighed, walking closer. "Look, I know you're angry, and you have every right to be. But can I hold him?" Sarah hesitated, glancing down at her baby. He was so small, so vulnerable. Did Alexander deserve this moment? She had half a mind to deny him, but some maternal instinct told her it might be unfair to keep a father from his child, no matter how callous he'd been. Carefully, she handed the baby over, maintaining an emotional distance. Alexander cradled his son, gingerly gazing at him in awe. "Hey, little guy," he whispered. A ghost of a smile touched his lips, as though seeing the reflection of himself in that tiny face. Then quietly he added, "How is Evander?" "His name is Daniel," Sarah declared firmly. Alexander's head jerked up. "What I thought Evander was." "Natalia's choice," Sarah said, icily. "I refuse to let that woman name my child, and if you have a problem with that tough luck, I am his mother. Daniel Mitchell, Donovan. That's his name," I decided. Alone. A flicker of anger lit Alexander's eyes, but he quickly swallowed it. He nodded grudgingly, pressing his lips together. "Okay, Daniel it is," he lingered a moment longer, uncertain. "I know everything's a mess," he ventured, "but I do want to be part of his life." Sarah fixed him with a penetrating glare. "Then handle your responsibilities. Stop lying. Stop trying to run two families at once. Stop humiliating me, or I'll make sure you never come near him again. And if you dare let Natalia anywhere near my child, I swear I'll fight you with every ounce of strength I have left." Alexander looked at her, a mixture of regret and frustration etched on his face. "I understand," he said. Then, carefully placing Daniel back into her arms, he left the room, the door quietly clicking shut behind him. Once Sarah was discharged, she returned to the Donovan mansion, though she felt like a stranger in her own home. She took solace in Daniel's presence, memorizing every feature, every cry, every soft breath. The divorce proceedings began in earnest, with Rebecca leading her legal team. News of the separation spread quickly through their social circle, many expressing shock and dismay. Some friends inevitably sided with Alexander, lured by business alliances and the promise of favorable deals, while others offered Sarah unwavering support. Alexander occasionally visited Daniel, each time stepping into the mansion with an air of remorse that never quite translated into genuine humility. Their interactions were chilly. Sarah's mother, or a housekeeper, would supervise these visits, ensuring the father could see his son, but never truly bridging the emotional gulf left by betrayal. Alexander never pressed for Evander anymore. The baby was Daniel, and that was that. Meanwhile, Natalia reveled in her sudden notoriety. She granted tabloid interviews, dropping cryptic references to our ongoing relationship with Alexander. She posted photos on social media from the penthouse or from the deck of Alexander's yacht, the Golden Horizon. She even teased that little Evander might come over someday, fueling media speculation that she had some secret maternal claim. Each new tidbit sent Sarah into a fury, but she kept her focus on Daniel, her legal position, and her emotional recovery. She refused to let Natalia's vanity-driven antics shake her. With each passing day, Sarah found new strength in motherhood. Her priorities were different now. She wanted a stable, loving environment for her son, free from scandal and heartbreak. Months passed. Daniel began to babble, forming sounds that occasionally startled Sarah with their resemblance to actual words. Though the divorce wasn't finalized, negotiations had advanced to the point where Alexander's legal team and Sarah's legal team were hashing out the terms of custody, child support, and asset division. One evening, after Daniel had drifted off to sleep, Sarah heard a knock at her door. Expecting the housekeeper or her mother, she was shocked to see Natalia standing there, dressed in a sleek black pencil skirt and a fitted white blouse. She held a folder under her arm and wore a triumphant smirk. Sarah's pulse quickened. "What are you doing here?" she demanded. Natalia brushed past the threshold, ignoring Sarah's glare. "I came to speak with you about Alexander and Daniel. I have some documents that need your signature, something about child support allocations." Her tone was clipped smug. Rage flared within Sarah. "I'm dealing with Alexander's lawyers directly. I don't know how you got these documents, but you have no right to bring them here." Natalia shrugged. "Alex trusts me. I'm a consultant after all. I handle important affairs for him. But on a personal note, I wanted to see Daniel. I named him after all." She let out a mocking laugh. "Well, I almost named him." With that, Sarah slapped Natalia across the face, the impact echoing in the foyer. Natalia gasped, hand flying to her cheek. "I've put up with enough from you." Sarah seethed, tears stinging her eyes. "Stay away from my son. You do not name him, you do not visit him, and you most certainly do not get to stroll into this house like you belong here." Natalia glowered, her smug composure fading. "You've got quite a slap, Sarah. But physical violence isn't going to solve your problems. Alexander will eventually come around. You're old news. You're the scorned wife. I'm the future." Sarah's chest heaved, tears now streaming. "Get out, before I call security. Or the police." Natalia tossed the folder onto a nearby table. "Do it. Meanwhile, those papers still need your signature. Don't make this difficult for Alex or yourself." She turned on her heel and left, slamming the door behind her. Sarah's entire body shook. She glanced upstairs, where her infant son slept peacefully. Biting down on her trembling lip, she told herself that she would never allow Natalia to threaten the life she was building. Never. She retrieved her phone and dialed her lawyer's emergency number, detailing exactly what had transpired. The divorce was finalized 4 months later. Alexander agreed to a substantial child support arrangement, as well as granting Sarah exclusive use of their Beverly Hills home, which had become her sanctuary with Daniel. While official joint custody was arranged, Alexander's role remained minimal, overshadowed by his involvement with Natalia and his expanding business empire. Natalia continued to flaunt her status as Alexander Donovan's partner, but the novelty was wearing thin. Society, which once embraced the scandal, grew bored. Tabloids found new fodder, new affairs, new millionaires to chase. Sarah poured her energy into motherhood and slowly rekindled her marketing career, consulting with small businesses in the Los Angeles area. Friends who admired her strength and resilience recommended her to colleagues, and soon she found a renewed sense of purpose. She also engaged in therapy to address the emotional scars left by Alexander's betrayal. Each session helped her realize she had worth beyond being Mrs. Donovan. She was determined to raise Daniel as a secure, loving child, unburdened by the bitterness of the past. On Daniel's first birthday, she threw a small, intimate gathering. No paparazzi, no tabloid reporters, just close friends, Rebecca, Sarah's mother, and a few children from the neighborhood. A small piece of her heart still ached for what could have been a father, joyously celebrating with them, but she was no longer imprisoned by regret. A year of heartbreak and healing had taught her that she could stand on her own, that Daniel's happiness did not hinge on his father's presence. Alexander did make an appearance, albeit briefly. He showed up near the end of the party, bearing a large box wrapped in silver paper. Sarah let him hand it to Daniel, who was too young to understand the complexities swirling around his family. For a brief moment, Alexander knelt by his son, helping him untie the ribbons, a genuine smile flickering across his face. Sarah stood by, feeling a wave of conflicting emotions, gratitude that Alexander cared enough to come, sadness that he'd missed so much, and a quiet acceptance that their paths had irreversibly diverged. When Alexander departed, his eyes lingered on Sarah. "Thank you for letting me be here," he said softly. She nodded, saying nothing. Both seemed to understand that their chapter had come to an end. The child in the room was their only link, and they would learn to navigate that bond with civility and caution. As the months turned into years, Sarah found herself thriving in ways she never anticipated. Her consulting business flourished, granting her financial independence. With time and therapy, the betrayal's sting lessened. She even began dipping her toes into the dating world, tentatively at first, mindful of the heartbreak she'd endured. Alexander continued his relationship with Natalia. Word around the business community was that their romance was as fiery as it was volatile. Paparazzi occasionally caught them in public spats. Rumors circulated about Natalia's supposed extravagance, draining Alexander's finances, but it was all speculation. Sarah no longer concerned herself with Alexander's personal life, except insofar as it affected Daniel. One day, seemingly out of the blue, Alexander reached out, requesting a private meeting with Sarah. Intrigued and cautious, she agreed to meet at a quiet restaurant in Brentwood. They sat at a corner table, a soft, golden light illuminating the fine linens and tasteful decor. Alexander, looking leaner and older, spoke first. "I wanted to apologize for everything," he said quietly. "Not for the affair. I've made peace with my decisions, but for how I handled it, how I hurt you. It was unfair and cruel. I'm sorry." Sarah studied him, noticing the shadows under his eyes, the wrinkles tracing his forehead. This was not the invincible millionaire she once knew. "I accept your apology," she replied, her voice measured. "But our lives have moved on. I hope you're here for something more than just closure." He nodded, glancing down. "I've been seeing less of Daniel. I realize now I don't want him to grow up barely knowing me. I'm proposing a clearer custody schedule, something that lets me be more involved. If that's something you can allow." Sarah felt a swirl of emotions. Part of her wanted to deny him, to punish him for his betrayals, but she looked beyond her own pain to Daniel's future. "Daniel deserves a relationship with both parents," she said softly. "If you can commit to stability, to not playing games, or having your girlfriend interfere, we can work something out." Relief flickered across Alexander's face. "Thank you," he paused. "You know, if I could go back." She held up a hand, stopping him. "It's done, Alexander. We can't rewrite history. We can only shape the future for Daniel's sake." He nodded solemnly, and they parted with a cautious, mutual respect, a tiny step toward forging a peaceful co-parenting relationship. Over time, Sarah and Alexander established a respectful co-parenting dynamic. He saw Daniel on certain weekends, occasionally taking him to amusements parks or short trips to Santa Barbara. Natalia remained a fleeting presence in Alexander's sphere, though with each passing year, her once firm grip seemed to loosen. Rumors swirled about Alexander, growing tired of her constant thirst for social media fame. Some said they broke up. Others said he kept her around as a business associate. Sarah didn't care. She was done living in the shadows of their drama. Daniel grew into a cheerful toddler, full of curiosity and an impish grin. He learned to walk across the wide hallways of the Beverly Hills mansion, the same space that once echoed with sorrow and betrayal. Now it rang with laughter, the squeak of toy cars, the patter of little feet. Sarah found her heart mending each time she watched him giggle, free of the burden of adult complications. When Daniel turned 4, Sarah sold the mansion. She'd come to see it as a relic of a marriage that no longer served her. With the proceeds, plus the robust settlement, she bought a cozy modern home in Santa Monica, closer to the beach, and to a more relaxed community. She decorated Daniel's new room with ocean-themed murals, letting him pick out a small bunk bed. They settled into a new rhythm, strolling the boardwalk on weekends, hosting small playdates, forging a simpler life away from the ostentatious mansion walls. One day, while packing up old boxes, Sarah discovered the stack of baby name lists she'd carefully kept in a drawer years ago. She flipped through them, seeing all the scribbled options, Daniel, Nathan, Jacob, etc. A pang of sadness surfaced, recalling how that precious moment of naming her son had almost been taken from her. She set the lists aside, gently reminded of how far she'd come. Daniel Mitchell Donovan was hers, a name she cherished untainted by the mistress who had tried so desperately to usurp Sarah's rightful place. Sarah had once believed that moving on meant simply surviving, that it would be a quiet process, lived in the margins of a life that had fallen apart. But as the years unfurled, she discovered that moving on meant rediscovering herself completely. It began with James Caldwell. He wasn't flashy or commanding like Alexander. He didn't sweep into rooms with bravado or try to dominate conversations. Instead, James was gentle, a patient listener, a man whose presence felt like exhaling after years of holding her breath. They met at a networking event. Through mutual clients, Sarah had been consulting for a local eco brand. James had just completed a sustainable housing project in the Santa Monica Hills. Their connection was immediate, not fiery and chaotic like her past, but warm and steady. The kind of connection built for rebuilding, not destroying. James respected her past without trying to erase it. He never asked for details she didn't want to share, and he never flinched when Daniel came up in conversation. In fact, he leaned in. From the beginning, he treated Daniel like more than just Sarah's child. He showed up at weekend soccer practices, built elaborate Lego castles on living room carpets, and tucked the boy in with bedtime stories of astronauts and sea dragons. Daniel, in his wide-eyed innocence, had taken to James like sunshine to a seed. Their bond was effortless. Meanwhile, Alexander remained a part of Daniel's life, but only in structured increments. He picked Daniel up every other weekend, sometimes took him on yacht outings or to upscale diners that offered child-friendly menus. But he always felt like a visiting dignitary, not a father, rooted in the everyday. Natalia, still clinging to her public persona, appeared less and less in their orbit. The media circus that once glorified her began to tire of the drama, and without an audience, Natalia's presence faded like a dying spotlight. Sarah didn't flinch at the gossip anymore. Her focus was on the life she'd chosen, not the one she'd been forced to escape. Her home in Santa Monica became a haven of laughter, learning, and love. She painted murals on Daniel's bedroom wall herself, an underwater world filled with whales and coral. She and James planted a herb garden in the backyard and hosted small dinners with neighbors who had no idea of her past tabloid life. On Daniel's first day of kindergarten, Sarah stood by the classroom door a little longer than most parents. As he turned to wave goodbye, backpack bouncing, she felt a pang of memory of the scared, pregnant woman she once was, sitting in a cold hospital room, whispering promises to a newborn she named alone. That pain would never vanish entirely. But it no longer ruled her. Now it served as proof. Proof that she had survived, that she had transformed. Years from now, when Daniel asked about his childhood, she'd tell him stories of strength and love, not scandal. She'd speak of the day she chose his name, the day she chose to raise him with integrity, and the day she chose herself. And in those quiet, sun-drenched moments, watching James help Daniel with homework, or listening to her son's laughter echoed down their hallway, Sarah finally understood. Moving on wasn't the end. It was the beginning. Even the most devastating betrayals can sow the seeds of new beginnings if we dare to let them. Sarah Donovan's journey from heartbroken wife to empowered mother reminds us that no amount of wealth or glamour can shield us from life's harsh twists. Yet, resilience, self-love, and a refusal to remain a victim can transform even the darkest chapters of our stories. If you found hope or inspiration in Sarah's journey, please remember to like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Your support helps us continue bringing you stories of courage, heartbreak, and redemption, real-life dramas that remind us we're never alone in our struggles. Join our community and stay tuned for more thought-provoking narratives that celebrate the power of the human spirit. Together, we can spread these messages of resilience and help others find their own path to healing. Thank you for being part of this journey. Stay strong and stay inspired.